What's that?
Socialist paper.
Socialist, man. You believe in socialism?
Huh?
You believe in socialism, really?
I think probably a lot of people here do.
Here. And what's so good about socialism?
Well, we think working people should have a say in running society, which they don't really right now.
How so? I'm a working person, in a way.
Yeah? What do you do?
I have my own business.
Uh-huh.
That makes me, working person. I, have my own employees who I pay,
Right.
handsomely. They're happy with what they have. I give
Right.
them, a raise on a regular basis. If I didn't have my business or we're not successful, where would they go?
Yeah,
Well,
but I mean, we have a society which, inequalities increase massively.
and
And,
that's. But how can we create an equal society? I'm
no, we're
just
not saying it's an absolutely equal society. We're saying that that there's key decisions that are made by.
Am I recording that, right?
Are you recording it?
Yeah.
Why?
Because
what?
I have my kind of own YouTube where I have discussions with socialists like yourself. See, I come from USSR originally.
Oh, okay.
And every time when I say, and obviously my day was major holiday in the USSR.
Yeah.
And it was obligatory. It's not like, I want to go, I don't want to go. No, you have to go. They will bus you to all these parades, so-called parades, demonstrations, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
we don't think it was a socialist society. So,
But that's the core issue. It's like, every time.
For one thing, there was no democracy.
But
we don't think you can have socialism without democracy.
But don't think that there's a contradiction between the two terms, that socialism and democracy are
I think
incompatible?
right now in the U.S. you have a contradiction between capitalism as it exists today in the U.S. and democracy. There's very little democracy in Washington. It's basically corporate interests that dominate the whole show. And most people in the U.S. actually agree with that. They don't believe that Washington is a place where where their interests are reflected.
Ideally, I would like to have free market economy. I mean, partially agree with you. Yes,
So you don't think there's a free market now?
Well, it's not exactly free. Market forces are here, obviously, and market forces are working. Again, me having my own business, it's like...
That's the point, that capitalism only survives now on the basis of the state actually creating the markets, keeping the markets going so that people can profit from them.
Are you against profit?
Particular interest, profit. The banks, the insurance companies.
Yeah, but let's get to the fundamentals. I mean, if you don't mind talking about it.
I'm not going to talk long because I got a lot of other people to talk to. But I'm not really, it's not that I'm not, in one way I'm interested, but in another way, you're clearly not interested on one level in what socialists are saying. Well, I don't know why you're interviewing them for what purpose.
The difference is I actually lived on both sides of the fence, so to speak.
Yep.
I have first-hand experience.
Yep.
I didn't want to, but we had to study all the aspects of socialism.
Right.
1/3 of our curriculum in college, school was this indoctrination, socialist, communist indoctrination.
Right.
And when I come over here and I see people voluntarily actually advocating for socialism, this kind of baffles me.
Well, socialism began in countries like Germany and the Western countries. It began there, actually spread to Russia from there.
I understand, but the one thing is when there's a theory, there are a lot of books written today about ideal societies, paradise on earth, or you name it.
Right.
And another thing is the actual reality. I mean, how to implement it. And what bothers me the most is how many people who advocate for socialism kind of look down on millions and millions and millions of innocent people who are murdered. Mm-hmm. I mean, to them, it's just a number. It's like, I don't remember who said it, the Churchill or somebody else. It's like, kill one person, it's a person. Kill millions, it's just the statistics. And...
we're not... Look, we're not Stalinists. In fact, the tradition that we follow is Trotsky's tradition, and his people wound up in the concentration camps.
Well,
they wound up being put to. When they opened the camps in the 50s, there was not a single one of them left.
Yeah, but
They've been liquidated so effectively.
Trotsky murdered so many people himself. So,
So
when you think about our founding fathers, who did they kill? Except, the British, but those were the enemy. There were other people from another
I think you misunderstand the revolution in the United States. It was a very bloody affair.
Well...
there was a huge migration of folks who opposed the revolution to Canada. They left.
So
a lot of what became... Well, anyway, it was part of the stock of the Canadian population, where people who had lived in the colonies here who were opposed to the revolution. It was an extremely bloody affair.
When was it?
This in the 1770s and the 1780s, the American Revolution.
Uh-huh.
I mean, revolutions are
Bloody.
The Russian Revolution was not in its inception. It was not bloody, but then you had how many countries that invaded on the side of the whites? Who created? Who started the bloodshed?
Lenin, actually, with his Red Terror. I mean, his own words, Red Terror.
The actual when they made the movie, when Sergei Eisenstein made the movie, whatever it was called, 10 Days Shook the World.
It was actually Reed who wrote this book on America.
So he made a movie.
He made but
I think that's what it was called. But it was about the events of the revolution. About
most
November.
of them were fake, but that's okay.
More people died making a movie than died in the actual events of November 1917.
But it's what followed, and the thing is,
I understand. But what did follow? What followed was that you had a rebellion that was financed and assisted by all of these foreign countries.
So they are to be blamed.
I would say so.
Really?
For the bulk of the bloodshed, yes.
Okay, but when Stalin eventually took over.
And that's a whole different thing.
So there's now another excuse.
I'm not making excuses. What I'm saying is that that real socialists never believed, including Trotsky, including Lenin, didn't believe that you could create socialism in one country. That was Stalin's idea. They simply saw what they were doing as a holding operation until there was revolution in the West. That's
around the world. No, I know,
right.
I know.
They didn't have this idea that we're going to create an ideal social, or any such thing on the basis of a backward, overwhelmingly peasant society. They didn't think that.
Yeah, they wanted to take revolutions throughout the world.
Was isolated. The German Revolution was defeated, and that is the context in which Stalin was able to rise to power, He liquidated the old Bolsheviks and imposed what is absolutely and without doubt one of the most tyrannical regimes the world has ever seen.
Right, but how come is that all the most tyrannical regimes that have ever existed have the name socialism in their names?
That with the Hitler, he had the name socialist.
Well, basically, yeah, Hitler too in a way.
Why did he adopt that name?
Because Hitler, in a way, was folk people like in German.
That the steel firms in Germany and a lot of heavy industry supported Hitler's rise to power.
Yes.
So the only reason they used the word socialist was because they were facing, he was essentially assisted into power by a section of big business in Germany as a counterweight to the communists. That was what the agenda with Hitler was.
Yeah, but again, see...
so, of course, they used the word socialist as a way of appealing to people. Because really, you weren't getting anywhere building anything in Germany at that point unless you kind of pretended to be some sort of socialist. No mass organization.
So that proves the point that whenever there's the word socialism... what
it proves is that the people... At that point in time, I mean, today is a different situation, but at that point in time, the mass of people did yearn for something fundamentally different. And if you were in Germany in 1931, you would have wanted something fundamentally different because you had inflation going through the roof, you had mass unemployment. You wanted something different. You wanted a change.
But how and
people did think that Hitler was going to bring the change. It's true.
Yeah, but how in the 21st century now that you advocate, for socialist alternatives, what are you going to do differently this time around, and how? That's another thing that kind of baffles me. You keep on blaming this was not socialism, true socialism, whatever. What's going to be different now? How?
But I'm just going to say this, and then I'm going to move on.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So the point.
Sorry for holding you up.
No, that's quite all right. The point. I held myself up. The point is that we exist not in Germany, 1931, where if Hitler had been defeated, it could have opened the road to a more healthy socialist development, or in Russia in 1917. Where you had the beginnings of a socialist development, but they couldn't be sustained in that type of society unless Russian resources and German industry became linked together. That could have been a basis materially. You have to have a material basis. Marx said this, that it had to be based. Socialism had to be based not on backwardness and poverty, but on the wealthiest countries. This surely is the wealthiest country.
Which is kind of funny,
So this is where the agenda of socialism needs most to be asserted on the basis of the resources of the wealthiest countries and of course of the poorer countries, and an international plan democratically agreed to with the with bringing ordinary people more into decision-making power than they've ever been before. That's how we move towards socialism. Socialism, in my view, in a sense, only means the massive extension of democracy. And all of the, and of course, the 20th century creates a huge problem because it's now associated with the idea of dictatorship. But in our view, that's false. It's not what it's not what it's about. Capitalism has, in our day and age, severely limited what is left of people's democratic rights. It does allow people to do this and spout a bit, but within very, very narrow boundaries, to be honest. If you look at the Patriot Act, if you look at all the other legislation that's been brought in this country, if you look at the way they pen demonstrations, you can kind of go on and on with this. Democratic rights exist only in an attenuated form. Ordinary people do not really have a say in how the resources of the society are disposed of.
Okay, before
I'm not talking about small business.
Yeah,
I believe that there should be small business. I don't believe that we should collectivize, quote unquote, everything remotely.
But that's the whole point. Then, somehow you step away from the definitions, like there are dictionary definitions of certain words. And again, that's another thing that kind of baffles me.
Of course, there's so many people who say they're socialists, right? I mean, we can agree on that.
No,
and they mean different things. So I'm trying to explain what I mean.
I understand, but how can we talk about different things using the same terminology? Then there has to be different terminology because by definition, socialism is this system. And again, it's a textbook, it's a dictionary definition that does not allow profit to be made, number one, and number two, fundamentally, that's the system that does not allow private ownership of means of production, or private ownership whatsoever of anything, essentially.
Well, I don't completely agree, but anyway, yes, I do see your point.
So, if you're saying that you would allow, like you said, the small businesses to thrive, then there will defy two fundamental tenets of socialism. So isn't there a contradiction right there? I mean, I don't mind you using some other words, but when you use, socialist, at the same time, you, in the next sentence, deny the fundamental definition of socialism, then how?
Okay. Anyway, I mean, it's a legitimate question. I'm only going to say this, right?
Yes.
I want you to think about this. You know about the polls that have been done this repeatedly, not just one polling organization, but polls that have been done where they ask young people, do you prefer socialism or capitalism in the United States?
Yes.
And more of that, or at least as many now say socialism is capitalism.
But do they know what socialism is all about? Because,
I don't think that, I agree, they're totally confused. But there are different ideas there. All I'm saying is, well, what are they searching for? They're searching for what I'm talking about, more democracy. They're searching for some way of reducing the massive inequality that exists in society. They're searching for a fair healthcare system. They're searching for many things. And then the police brutality. They may mean many, many things, which I would agree with, but the whole question is, how do we get there? How do we achieve that? And that's a discussion that has to happen.
But
how do ordinary people take ownership of their society and make decisions about the direction?
So in other words, you are for socialism, and at the same time you are for private ownership and for making a profit.
I am not. What I'm saying is that I think if you want to say it's a mixed economy, or I think that the key sectors have to be brought under public ownership, but there has to be democratic control over that. It's not just some state entity that you appoint bureaucrats to. That ordinary people have some say in how these resources, the energy resources, the banking resources, are disposed of.
You're splitting hairs, but again, fundamentally,
maybe I am.
You're for socialism and at the same time for private ownership of means of production.
I'm up to a. Depends what that.
To me, it's very confusing. But good luck with whatever you're doing. You're not going to succeed anyway. Thank God. we will prevail.
won $15 an hour in Seattle.
You did what? $10.
15. No, I'm
Okay,
saying
15. Fine.
we
Okay.
won somebody. Somebody was elected as a socialist in Seattle City Council through a serious campaign, and winning the majority of people in Seattle to this point of view.
Okay. Again,
And we're helping to change the national discussion around that. Now 60% of Americans say they support a $15 minimum wage.
I understand. So you
If
go.
it wasn't for socialists, how
Fine,
would that
but
be
you go to McDonald's. You now pay $15 a burger. I understand. There are no miracles. No, I
Anyway.
mean, think about it. I'm a small businessman. I know how it works.
Right. Anyway, good talking.
Nice talking to you. See ya. Bye-bye.